Monday, October 27th edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Joe Bartel. You can follow me on Twitter, JB Fantasy Sports. Alongside me every week, Jake Letarski. You can follow him at RotoJake. Going ahead and looking at the Week 9 waiver wire pickups. 4 teams on bye this week. Browns, Jets, Eagles, Buccaneers. I think, unfortunately, for a lot of folks, this is going to be tough because you have the Saquon Barkley's, Quinshon Judkins, Bucky Irvings of the world. But the reality is a bunch of injuries has kind of depleted that anyway, where you're almost thankful that we have these bye week situations for a few of these teams too. And we are coming off the 6 teams on bye, the bye again part as well. This is an important note. And Jake, I want you to make sure you circle back with me as well too on this throughout the show. One of the more crucial things that you should do when you're listening to this podcast and scrolling through your lineups and other teams, check to see who was dropped, because the names that we might mention here are going to be completely different than what we might be able to assume or expect across your leagues. When 6 teams are on bye, everyone's making very difficult decisions. It's really, really important that the very first thing that you do, either while you're listening to this podcast or preparing for the waivers Week 9, is to make sure you check the transaction report.
Yeah, absolutely. I put that note right at the top before we get into any of these guys. You know, we have a 50% rostered rule here, and there, of course, are a bunch of guys, especially running backs this week, that make that cut. However, again, we just off of bye-mageddon, 6 teams on bye. People had to make some tough decisions. You know, am I going to punt this spot this week, or am I going to drop a player that's really good? I saw Jared Goff dropped in a league, in a 12-team league. I saw a lot of people, Brian Thomas Jr. got dropped in a handful of leagues that I've seen. You know, obviously some rookie moves out there, but and on top of that, you know, if someone dropped Mike Evans and you have an IR spot, grab him. If you have, you know, a dead weight right now, maybe stash Brashard Smith ahead of Monday Night Football in case he has a real big game and takes precedent over all these guys. Trey Benson is 55% rostered, missed our threshold, but on a bye, on IR, a lot of people probably dropped him, and he's going to probably help you a lot in a couple of weeks. So definitely want to check this out. And, you know, our top guy is another guy that was dropped in a handful of leagues.
Yeah, Jake, the leagues that have Brian Thomas Jr. and somebody's dropping them, you could probably not play in them next year. That's not worth your skill set and competitive level. I'm just going to tell you right
easy
now.
money. You want to play in those leagues, right?
I mean, I guess. A man of your stature, though, Jake, I'd assume that that's small potatoes to you. And
hey, I don't care where the cash comes from.
All right, let's get to our top 5 pickups for this week. You and I typically, not that we're in lockstep, but we'll go through basically 7 names because you'll have 5, and I'll more or less agree with you. I would actually argue that we're going to have 10 different names because I like the receiver waiver wire options this week. And ahead of the show, we were talking beforehand, you have 5 separate running backs that you like too. So very interesting, it seems like.
Exactly. So to me, there are like 5 receivers that are all on basically the same plane, right? And one of them is going to end up being available for nothing. None of them, in my mind, are priority ads. I went heavy on running backs. I mean, there's one quarterback I kind of like that, that could sneak in there. But it's a running back heavy week here. So, let's just get it started. Obviously, Tyrone Tracy is your number 1 pickup. He under our threshold by just a hair. He's 49% rostered on Yahoo leagues. But also, I wanted to make sure to include him because there is some draft bias, right? Just about any team that drafted and abandoned their teams, and there's the auto draft aspect as well. Tyrone Tracy was a player that was taken because we didn't know quite what Cam Skattebo was going to turn into and how good he's going to be. Obviously, Skattebo, it's a bummer. Gruesome ankle injury, out for the year, we can pretty much safely say here. Dislocated right ankle, what it calls. If you have the stomach to view it, it's a little more serious than that. So that's rough, air cast surgery, the whole deal here. But of course, on a Giants offense that had been surging a little bit, and a lot of it was due to Skattebo, Tyrone Tracy becomes RB1 over there. And last year, even when the Giants were bad, Tyrone Tracy had a good run of fantasy utility, and he pretty much jumps into RB1. Yeah, I'm sure Devin Singletary will have some kind of role, but Tyrone Tracy is going to lead this backfield. And the Giants, they haven't had their bye yet, but they don't have a bye till week 14. And a lot of the running backs that we're going to talk about after this have their bye coming up this week. So that even makes Tracy more of a priority ad. He's an easy flex, easy RB2, coming up here. They have a couple okay matchups here. They're versus San Francisco, who's 19, at Chicago, who's 25. Then they get 3 top 5 defenses in a row. But, it's RB1. It shouldn't really matter here. So it's not like Tyrone Tracy lit it up in relief of Cam Skattebo. Obviously, the Giants had some catch-up to do. He ran 10 times for 39 yards, caught 2 of 3 targets for 14 yards. But he's going to find the end zone. He's going to get the bulk of the work. And for that reason, I think it's time to empty the entire clip.
Yep.
Tyrone Tracy. We've only had a handful of these guys that we've said empty all your fab, use your first priority. Tyrone Tracy is the easiest one. Obviously, if you were a Scadaboo owner manager, you want to do that. But I think just in general, keep the Scadaboo guy honest, because I mean, Scadaboo was a late pick, and if you ended up drafting him, and he's probably one of those teams that's in the top half, really geared towards playoff contention. To get a player like that who's a surefire starter. So, for all intents and purposes, Tyrone Tracy, dump the rest of the fab. It's time to do that. We're heading into week 9 here. Halfway point. Can't take it with you. I mean, unless your league has a weird rule where you can't pick up anybody if you have $0 in fab, which I've seen some places that are like that. It's rare, but it exists. But in 99% of cases, if somebody dropped Tyrone Tracy, you want to go get him. And I mentioned 49% rostered because of that draft bias. Only 7% rostered in those Yahoo Diamond leagues.
I was going to say, he's available in 5 of my 17 leagues. Yeah, exactly. That was one of the very first things I checked was Tyrone Tracy.
As we get into, week 9, we use the standard default Yahoo like ownership. But there are a lot of teams and there are a lot of junk drafts that happened that didn't have anything at stake. And there are a lot of people that have just abandoned their teams. So sometimes these ownership percentages are a little misleading. So I'll turn towards the diamond percentage a little bit. And, not to plug our friends at Yahoo too much, but I think that might be a Yahoo Plus feature to see. And that's honestly one of the things that, could make that worth it here. But yeah, only 7% in diamond leagues. So the active, smart I put in quotes because, just because you pay to join the league doesn't make you a savvy owner necessarily. Joe and I see this all the time, but the leagues where the people are the most active and less incentive to quit after week 8. Right. Tracy has a lot of availability. So dump the rest of your fab, use your first waiver option, whatever you have to do to get him. If you can, go for it.
I agreed. I wrote the same thing in the article, which will be posted later today. You'll be able to see this video in the article itself, too. My only hesitation, and it's very, very small. We've heard rumors about the Giants trading for Jalen Waddle or Chris Olave or Jacoby Myers to add weapons for Jackson Dart. I could see the Giants trading for a running back to keep the improvement and development of Dart. It would be a very foolish thing to do with the Giants sitting where they are in the standings, but
I don't factor that into my equation at all. The Giants are 2-6, and they just had a heavy blow. Listen, you've got Jackson Dart on a rookie contract. Your window isn't necessarily, I need to win this year. Get some better picks. Let him play it out. Let him develop. They're not buyers. A 2-6 team shouldn't be buyers in any case, and they can't win on the road.
They shouldn't.
5 on the road.
They shouldn't be, and yet I thought we've heard a lot of smoke, seen a lot of smoke with a few of those receiver ones, and it makes a little bit of a difference, right? With Malik Neighbors and then another receiver as opposed to Scadaboo theoretically healthy next year, and then Tyrone Tracy. I actually, even deeper leagues, don't mind Devin Singletary. Like we play in that ridiculous dynasty league, for example. Singletary is a guy that just have in your roster. I'm totally fine with.
Singletary will get picked up in Fishbowl, for example.
Yeah. That's another
kind of thing. So
another great one too.
There's something there. Obviously, he's well outside our top 5, but all of a sudden we mention him as opposed to completely ignoring him.
So let's get into the speculation realm again, going over our top 10 waiver wire pickups for this week. You have a bunch of running backs. I have a bunch of receivers. Both Tyjae Spears and Isaiah Davis could be in a spot where they are in a much better fantasy situation entering week 10. So let's lay the land a little bit. We have week 9 here, and then the trade deadline for the NFL happens Tuesday. Normally we were recording our podcast during it, but Tuesday of week 10. So we'll find out if Breece Hall is on the Jets. We'll find out if Tony Pollard is still there. We'll find out my guy Jerome Ford, who we keep mentioning, if he's still in the Browns, for example. The trade deadline theoretically could happen this week, especially with the number of teams that are of consequence to trade on their bye. So the Jets, for example, the Browns, for example, 2 of the 4 teams on bye. I'm very curious if Breece Hall will be a Jet by if Breece Hall will be a different team for this week with the Jets on a bye. So Isaiah Davis on your list as well, but also Tony Pollard as well too for the Titans.
Well, I'm sorry, it's not actually Tony Pollard. It's Tyjae Spears. And, there are a lot of running back injuries this week. And initially I had some of their backups on top before realizing they were on a bye. My number 2 pickup this week is someone that can go ahead and help you this week. And I was pretty surprised that Tyjae Spears of the Titans is only 31% rostered in Yahoo leagues. Of course, conventional thinking is we expect him to be the pass catcher when they're trailing. But isn't that every single game for the Titans, whether it's their offense not keeping up early or their when I was looking at defenses, the Titans are number one in fantasy points allowed to opposing defenses. So they're digging themselves holes in a variety of ways is the point that I want to make here. And, so you want the pass catching back there. And if you look at the snap counts, Tyjae Spears has out-snapped Tony Pollard. He did 34-32 this week, so a small run. Pollard got a couple more carries, but Spears had more yards, I believe. And he's out-snapped Pollard in 2 of the last 3 games now. So there was a little bit of a reintroduction period when Spears came off IR. And obviously, I know you like to classify him as injury prone. That stature is probably not ready to take a huge workload. There's a little bit of Pollard trade rumors going around, but overall, that's not driving my decision. I think Tyjae Spears is RB1 for Tennessee on a team that's behind, going to get a lot of dump offs from Cam Ward. So Spears at 31% is wild to me. I would have thought that, after out snapping Pollard once, he would have been picked up in a lot of leagues. But Spears is my number 2 pickup now. You can play him this week against the Chargers, who are 15 against opposing backs in half PPR right there. And then there's a bye week. And then there's, a big stretch of top 10 defenses, Houston, Seattle, Jacksonville, Cleveland after the bye. So it's a tough schedule. But again, based on how Spears is used in games that they're going to be underdogs in, that's fine. The schedule doesn't scare me off. And then he has 2+ matchups in the fantasy playoffs here. So Spears is my number 2 pickup at 31% rostered. Unlike a lot of these backs that we're about to talk about next on my list personally, Spears can help you this week. And, if he has another big game this week, that ownership's going to be over the roof here. So this is probably your last chance to grab him.
Well, and again, with Isaiah Davis, I have been talking about him on my Waiver article for 3 weeks. We mentioned on the Angel Fire radio show as well, too, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on Saturdays on SiriusXM. I think there's real reason to have Isaiah Davis on your roster right now. I know the Jets are on a bye, and it has nothing to do with what he did against the Bengals defense either, and far more consequentially, if Breece Hall is to be traded, that Isaiah Davis becomes the lone back for the Jets. I think volume absolutely is key in this instance.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are 3 backs, that I put next in my top 5. Isaiah Davis, of course. I did Tank Bigsby because of the Saquon injury, and Dylan Sampson because of the Judkins injury. But the Jets, Eagles, and the Browns all have a bye week. So it's certainly possible that Saquon comes back week 10, that Judkins comes back week 10 healthy, and Bigsby and Sampson aren't even really stash candidates anymore because they'll fall below kind of our handcuff rankings that I made and we'll do later on in the show here. But the reason I put Davis ahead of those 2 is because he has a much higher ceiling after the bye. Now, in a shootout against the Bengals that the Jets managed to pick up, what was their first win all year?
Yes.
Yeah. In a shootout against
Survivor. Mm-hmm.
So I had actually been rostering. We talked about Isaiah Davis last week and a little bit the week before, not to this extent, but I'd been rostering him in a few leagues, and dang, I sure wish I would have I would have played him, because not playing him, not conventional thinking to play him. I get it, but he did have basically the game of his career. He ran the ball 7 times for 65 yards, caught all 5 of his targets for 44 yards. Now with Garrett Wilson out, Isaiah Davis had as many targets as any of the receivers the Jets had. Mason Taylor led the way with 8, and then Tyler Johnson had 5. Weird fluky stuff, but Isaiah Davis obviously has shown his pass catching chops. And again, Breece Hall seems like a far more realistic trade candidate than someone like Kamara. Pollard could go in that mix, but Breece Hall for running back needy teams is the top target, for these teams. So for that reason, the Jets, you can definitely have obviously fantasy utility on a bad team. The Jets, kind of like the Titans rationale, they're going to be playing from behind. Their pass catching back is going to be used. Braylon Allen, of course, on IR. There's just not much else in that running back room. So Isaiah Davis, who does have some skill that we saw, is going to pretty much take over this backfield if anything happens to Breece Hall. Breece Hall hasn't had even if he doesn't get traded, he hasn't had a perfectly clean track record of staying healthy.
Yep.
And Isaiah Davis proved that he could be worth some type of role this week. So there's a little standalone value, even if Hall doesn't end up moving. But yeah, the big thing is a speculative ad based on the potential of Hall moving, because Isaiah Davis would have a ton of PPR utility in that scenario.
I think I would rather have Isaiah Davis over Tyjae Spears, just point blank. Now, I know you have been a Tyjae Spears guy for a lot of the time that I've known you, and maybe there's a bit of a bias involved in that. And frankly, I think there's probably bias in my way that I don't want many pieces of the Titans offense as a whole. Like, it's just,
you could say
it's more of a
Jets.
Yes, you can. So where I'm going with this is, I am that confident that Breece Hall is going to be traded.
Okay, fair.
That's how valuable I find Isaiah Davis to be, that I think I'd rather have him over Tyjae Spears. And I understand that Tyjae Spears has, on a per game basis, far more utility than Isaiah Davis does. But the more important part is, of these three, Tyrone Tracy, Isaiah Davis, Tyjae Spears, you're in a good spot. I mean, these should be picked up. There are valuable running back options. Afterwards, Dylan Sampson, Tank Bigsby, we'll mention them in just a bit, but like, with those teams on bye and them basically being only related to injuries to the starting running backs, I think it is a 3 running back race, which is why I go back to, and I put this in the article again, posted on the site later today, Chimere DK for the Titans, Christian Watson for the Packers, or either of the Texans receivers, Jalen Noel or Jaden Higgins, probably more of Noel. I like all of them more than our cover boy here in the YouTube video, Dylan Sampson. I like all of those receivers as well. If you need plays this week, it actually is a pretty deep waiver wire in my mind from a running back and receiver perspective.
Yeah, there's a good chance. I put Bigsby and Sampson, to round out my top 5. But again, this is kind of one of those side effects of doing the show early in the week, not having any practice report data on these teams, which we won't because they'll be on bye anyway. But very easily by this time, towards the end of the week, they could end up being 19 and 20 on my list instead of 4 and 5. So I mentioned Bigsby, I mentioned Sampson, new names to talk about, but obviously it's Tracy number 1, and then Spears and maybe Davis on there. And again, the reason you're so confident that Breece Hall is getting traded, I know the NFL has been more active at the trade deadline than usual, and maybe that's a trend, over the last couple of years, but historically, the NFL is not a super active trade deadline. So I'm leaning towards more, the Jets ask too much and nothing happens, leading up to the deadline. So I'm thinking it more of, what is more, you think it's more likely Hall moves. I think it's more likely maybe that rosters stay status quo. That's my default to go to, which puts Spears above Davis, because Spears isn't going anywhere. We know that. Pollard might, Hall probably has a better chance of moving than Pollard, but, again, I try not to think of that, too much.
We'll get to the receivers and kind of how I'm sorting them through. There's actually a few more as well on the quick hitter list of sorts where if you are in need of a spot start this week, and it's certainly possible if you've been playing the Tez Johnsons of the world like I have been, I think it's actually a very good week to go ahead and find some targets out there at receiver. We're going to go by position here in the waiver wire article. I'm sorry, we'll have the article up as well too, but also on the Waiver Wire podcast here. I want to get a word from our sponsors here, Chalkboard. First, cash in on your NFL picks this season with Chalkboard. Simply choose more or less on your favorite player stats to win up to 5,000 times your money. For a limited time only, new players receive a free pick and 100%. Just 100% deposit match. See why over 1 million fans have already locked in with Chalkboard to turn their sports knowledge into cold, hard cash. Whether you're locking in the perfect slip with alternate lines, using the cash out feature, take your money and run, or hammering the daily promos like I like to do a lot, today is your chance to win up to $40,000 on a single entry. Stop sitting on the sidelines. Get into the game with Chalkboard Fantasy Sports, now available in 30-plus states. Download Chalkboard today and use promo code ROTONFL. That's ROTONFL to claim your free pick and my goodness, I did it again. 100% deposit match right now. Let's get to the quarterback streaming options, Jake. And when I was putting together the article, it became very, very bleak for me to figure out what degree of confidence after a few of the guys already rostered. I mentioned Brock Purdy in the article, which may have slipped down under. In your diamond leagues, I bet she's close to like 30%. You've got a lot of injuries. Maybe IR stashes aren't a thing, but right now rostered in 66% of Yahoo leagues. And then the only other streamer I liked was probably Sam Darnold. It's a tough group this week for sure.
Yeah, so Purdy is 66% roster, but only 20% in diamond leagues. A lot of people had to move on from him. I had a note that Joe Flacco actually shot up to 61% rostered. The Jamar Chase effect, man. 18, 25, 24 fantasy points in 3 games with the Bengals. He gets the Bears before a week 10 bye, so Joe Flacco is interesting, but above that threshold in most cases. The only guy I really wrote down that meets our requirement that would be worth it in single quarterback leagues is Sam Darnold. He got down to 36% rostered after Seattle's week 8 bye. He's going to come back, and he's got the Commanders, who are 25th against opposing quarterbacks in week 9. Sam Darnold has had 18 fantasy points in 5 of 7 weeks this year. His floor, now right before the bye, he played the Texans and only had 14.8 points, which is, fine. But the Texans are the number 1 defense against opposing quarterbacks in terms of fantasy points. Take sentences I didn't think I'd say in week 9 for 100 there, Trebek. But Sam Darnold has been killing it even in tough matchups, and he's just been a solid quarterback. I mean, he's stayed steadily in my lineup all week in the Superflex, and If your guys are having buys or if you've struggled, he's someone that you can go ahead and pick up here. So Sam Darnold, not only my best streamer, but rest of season value. Looking at the rest of the streamers, there's a ton of uncertain quarterbacks. I think in the streamers, I put there are 5 or 6 names that I put. Well, this guy or maybe this other guy if he starts. So we'll do quick hitters in a second. But I did want to throw out Tua against Baltimore. The Dolphins showed some signs of life this week. They'll be at home against the Ravens defense. That just ain't it. If you have to stream, and again, you're looking back at who's on bye. Obviously, Jalen Hurts is on
Baker
bye.
Mayfield.
Baker Mayfield's on bye. Chances are, if you had one of those two, you didn't need to roster a second quarterback necessarily. You weren't really messing around with Dylan Gabriel or the Fields Taylor dilemma there. So a couple of guys on bye. So I threw Tua as the only other notable streamer, but I'm still looking at Darnold first because there's the rest of the season utility there. It looks like, just the fact that he has JSN to throw to and they have such great chemistry lifts his standalone value up so much.
Ravens defense is going to be back and relatively healthy. We saw it against Caleb Williams this week. The Ravens will show as the second worst team, best team for opposing fantasy quarterbacks. I do not think that's a thing moving forward. And motivated with Lamar Jackson return, which we are speculating will happen Thursday, Tua is about as low on the list as it possibly can get. Like, there's a bunch of guys that are this or that. And I'd rather play Tua over Cam Ward, for example. Yeah. I want literally nothing to do with Tua. I'm very, very worried about. I would rather play JJ McCarthy.
Rodgers against the Colts, Trevor Lawrence.
I would rather play Rodgers, Lawrence. I'd rather play JJ McCarthy. I would rather play Michael Penix if he's available, even against the Patriots defense. Like, this is not the Ravens defense that we saw in the first month or even the weeks 5 through 7. Like, those guys, Nate Wiggins is back healthy.
Even with Lamar,
but they were all hurt. That's where I go. Like, everyone came back healthy after the bye, and to my knowledge, I don't think anyone really got injured after that win over the Bears. Yeah. So I would not.
Roquan Smith did help my IDP league there. So
yes, he did. So let's go over all these if this or that quarterbacks. We can call them 2 QB leagues. My God, Jake, if we have to play any of these in a 2 QB league, you might as well wave the white flag. I actually, in our Dynasty League, had to play Tyler Shuck because I had Jacoby Brissett and Lamar Jackson. I'm quitting that league, by the way, because it's super dumb, and your stupid trade also made me want to do that too. But as a side note,
me and List wheeling and dealing.
Yes, this is a completely tough spot, given I think basically a third of the league is just either tattered by injuries or the bye weeks being a factor. It's going to be really bleak, I think, if you are really down to these level of options.
Yeah, so Tyler Shuck took over for Spencer Rattler in the third quarter after Rattler could only muster 3 points against a relatively mediocre Tampa Bay defense here. That's a QB battle we'll have to monitor. Again, It's too early to really tell right now. Michael Penix showed up on the injury report, knee injury. All of a sudden, one thing led to another. Kirk Cousins is starting for the Falcons. He was 21 for 31, 173 yards. No touchdowns or picks. They lost by 24 points. Cousins also didn't have Drake London with a hip injury. He basically force-fed Kyle Pitts while Mooney was a non-factor. So, again, I guess watch that Cousins-Penix deal. Then we turn to the Jets, who are on a bye, so this doesn't really matter. But Tyrod Taylor split first-team reps with Fields in practice all week. Then he ends up getting ruled out Saturday with a knee injury. Fields starts, leads the comeback effort, and the Jets' first win of the year. So it looks like maybe Fields will be fine over there. But, again, we're limited to 2 quarterback leagues where we're thinking about that. Marcus Mariota is going to start tonight against the Chiefs. I ended up having to start him in a league where I had both quarterbacks on bye.
I need him too. Need 31 points out of Marcus Mariota and
absolute miracle. So Terry McLaurin's back, so he's got a weapon.
I think Devo's back too.
Watch and see how that goes, and watch the Jane Daniels injury report throughout the week. We kind of knew this at this time last week, but Andy Dalton got blown out by the Bills. He was starting for Carolina. They lost 40-9. He was 16-24, 175 yards, no touchdowns, a pick. Didn't really help anybody but Ted McMillan, who had a career-high 43% target share, caught 7 passes for 99 yards here. So McMillan looks fine with Dalton, but not really super attracted to Dalton.
McMillan is going to terrorize Keyshawn Nixon. He's going to terrorize Keyshawn Nixon.
For sure. Then you got the Ravens quarterbacks. We had the Lamar Jackson injury reporting fiasco here. NFL will probably make an example out of them. But one thing led to another. Tyler Huntley ended up starting. We're probably expecting Lamar Jackson back in week 10, though. If he's good enough to run around with the scout team, he's got to be making a return. I mean, if they lose it to the Bears, things are maybe different. But at 2-5, the season is not dead yet, and he could probably lead a resurgence there. And we went the Ravens, the whole take away the ping pong tables team too this year. We'll see how that goes.
They were, yes. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. Funny stuff here. And then we got to talk about the Vikings quarterbacks that happened on Thursday night. They really hung Carson Wentz out to dry to the point where I almost felt bad for the guy. McCarthy's there on the sidelines, apparently not healthy enough to go. After so many hits, Wentz had finally had enough. Max Brosmer entered the game. It's time to get J.J. McCarthy back to try to set this season right, because it's been tough going for the Vikings lately. I understand not wanting to put the kid out there if he's not 100%, but you got to,
or just not good,
closer and closer and closer. So JJ McCarthy got down to like 23% rostered, and he's at Detroit this week, who at least he's indoors, and they're going to have to put up a lot of points to keep up with the Lions, especially the Lions coming off a bye. So McCarthy would probably, he'd rank above Tua, I guess, in my in my stream rankings if he comes back. And again, McCarthy is not some lighted up type of guy, so I don't really know about having him as a rest of season guy. But matchup dependent, like this week, there could be a little bit of attractiveness there. So you maybe take a look at him.
And he gets you some yards on the ground. I don't think McCarthy's a very good quarterback. I actually feel very strongly about that. He's obviously better than half of Carson Wentz at this point.
Yeah. That's why I didn't put him in the single quarterback leagues. I don't think you can pick him up and rely on him. He's very much a matchup dependent stream in my eyes.
For sure. I'm with you too. Like, I would rather play McCarthy over Cam Ward, right? I mean, that's the level in which we're looking at the very bottom of the quarterback. And I mentioned Andy Dalton and Ted McMillan again against the Packers. I don't want to play Andy Dalton. That's like one of those I actually feel very comfortable Packers defense will do just fine. Ted McMillan will dunk on Keyshawn Nixon probably 4 times. And the Packers, hopefully, Jake, should do what they're supposed to do against a bad team for the first time all year.
Looks like that. They'll win the shootout.
Yeah, the rushing attack of Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard has been very dangerous. I think with Devontae Wyatt back for the Packers, I'll be surprised if the Panthers score a lot of points, but we'll have to see.
Edgerrin Cooper played out of his mind last night.
He also was
like an all-pro for sure.
Yeah, he was also fantastic. We'll circle back to the running backs again. Jake's top 5 list was more or less just inundated with a bunch of running backs. My receiver group is one that I like a little bit more, but overall it is a deeper waiver wire option. I think making sure we have the structure and organization of these running backs set for you guys listening is very important. Before we do that, though, it's football season at Circa Sports, and the best place, of course, to catch all the games is at Circa Resort and Casino in downtown Las Vegas, featuring the best pool in history, Stadium Swim. Stadium Swim has 3 levels, 6 pools, and 143-foot diagonal screen. Well, it's Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Stadium Swim is America's favorite place to watch football. No matter the size of your group, Stadium Swim is the place for you. From owner suites to cabanas, day beds to stadium booths, there are seating choices for everyone. And the best part, Stadium Swim is open 365 days a year. With temperature-controlled pools, it's a great place to catch the games all season long. Stadium Swim located at Circa Resort and Casino in downtown Las Vegas. Book today at circalasvegas.com. All right. I think it's worth categorizing in shallower leagues. If Brashard Smith, and he might still be available, or Kyle Monangai were not picked up, I do think they add into this conversation. So Tyrone Tracy, who we talked about at the very top of the show with Cam Skydebu out for the rest of the year, Tyrone Tracy is the spend the fab all the way up on the top of the leaderboards here for the waiver wire running backs. Where you rank Brashard Smith and Kyle Monangai among this group, Jake, I think is really interesting because you liked the running backs a bit more than I do. Like, how would you end up having these guys kind of tiered together?
So Brashard Smith's an interesting case. If you have a player that's droppable on a bye this week and Brashard Smith is up there, this would be a good time to jump in before the Monday night game and grab Brashard Smith, cut your guy that you were going to drop anyway, and then guess what? You can always cut him this week if he, in a couple of days if he doesn't have the role you think he might. So Brashard Smith is someone that you can actually act on now, which is rare for our Monday show. That's interesting. I still think this is Pacheco's backfield, and Brashard Smith takes over the Kareem Hunt role, but I'm not super crazy. I'm not as crazy as him about you. Crazy about him as you are, I should say. Tyrone Tracy, obviously number 1. We mentioned that at the start of the show.
Yep.
I rank Tyjae Spears number 2, especially for those PPR leagues. He helps you right away. Then you have guys like Isaiah Davis, Tank Bigsby, Dylan Sampson, all guys that are speculative based on either their RB1 getting traded or their RB1 currently being injured. All of these teams, the Jets, the Eagles, and the Browns, are on bye this week, though. So those guys are tough. I didn't note, but I didn't mention this in the beginning. There's the Michael Carter Bam Knight factor. The Cardinals are coming off a bye, so those two players are rostered at 20% and 19% respectively. They are at Dallas in week 9. So Michael Carter's been more the guy when the Cardinals are behind. Bam Knight's been more of the guy running the ball when the Cardinals are competitive or ahead. I would lean towards Carter this week in what might be a shootout. Michael Carter is only 20% rostered. And I would actually rank, if you're playing because you need a spot start this week, say you're a Saquon owner or Judkins, the likes of that, guys that were starting every week, I'd actually put Michael Carter ahead of, he could be 3 overall in my rankings this week because you can't play any of those other 3 guys. So he's the guy, you need someone this week. That's interesting. But again, I also mentioned at the top of the show here that Trey Benson, 55% roster. I believe his window could open either this week or next week. Next week. That it could open, but 55%, maybe wait another week to see if nobody scoops him up and grab him. But I've rostered Benson throughout his injury on my stake league roster. That's just a 14-team league with shallow benches too. So I've kept him that long. I like, he takes over. He does what Carter and Knight do combined, but better, I think. So he'll be the guy there. That's the stash. But if you need a week 9 RB2 flex desperation, Michael Carter jumps up the rankings with Bam Knight following slightly behind him. I think Carter has the better game flow in this situation. You also wanted to mention Samaje Perine. That was a very interesting ad that I think is worth a mention. Chase Brown, of course, goes out and has his best game of the year, catches a touchdown, runs for a touchdown. But Perine was far more effective on the ground, carried the ball 9 times for 94 yards and a score, helped by a 32-yard run. And Perine just got 1 target in the passing game. Brown has still used a little bit more there. So Chase Brown's still RB1. We won't have shootouts against the Jets, but Samaje Perine is sneaking into that little bit of standalone value situation, maybe a little bit more than the handcuffs when we get to ranking them.
Again, important to note that the Bengals are the Bears this week, so that's in large part the byproduct of why I mentioned Samaje Perine. I'm playing Jeremy McNichols in a league this week. It can be bleak. And if you're in that spot, Samaje Perine widely available everywhere, he's going to at least get you 3 or 4 points, if not a bit more, in a plus matchup against the Bears. I'm going to just re-rank this, or I guess re-rack it for everyone so we kind of have the clarity. Tyrone Tracy, very top waiver wire pickup for sure if he's somehow available in your leagues. Tyjae Spears, Isaiah Davis, you can go either way in those. I'm having Isaiah Davis over Tyjae Spears. Jake is different. I understand entirely where Jake's going with. I'm not really debating that. I would rather have Brashard Smith and Kyle Monangai over Tank Bigsby and Dylan Sampson. I would rather have Brashard Smith and Kyle Monangai over Michael Carter as well, too, who you were talking up a little bit. I understand the game script and where Michael Carter would get more volume. I just feel like the Cardinals have not been doing that, even though they've been in those situations before. So
I like Carter week 9. I like Monangai rest of season.
Okay. And with the Bears, with their bye week done, I still value those guys a little bit as well, too. So just keep that in mind with it. So
more running back still to talk about even. It's
absolutely.
I wanted to touch on Bashal Tutin, who's 32% rostered. He's coming out of that bye. We'll see what happens with Travis Etienne. I don't think he's going to garner much trade market attention or anything like that. He wasn't exactly lighting it up before the bye. But Tutin, if you play into the school of thought that, okay, it's the second half of the season, they're off their bye, time to let the rookie go a little bit. They traded Tank Bigsby early in the year, obviously, so they must have some Tutin confidence here. Coming up week 9 at the Raiders 16, at the Texans 10 versus the Chargers 15. Basically the next 5 weeks outside of the Texans, it's a middle to bottom half matchup here. And Tutin's interesting. It's a speculative ad, but at only 32% rostered. Run and grab him, see what's up. He's someone that I can't necessarily advise throwing in your starting lineup this week, but it's more of a stash. And, if you can afford it, he's someone that I want to think about here too. Any thoughts on him, or can I keep going on my list?
No, keep going. Yeah, we're good.
Yep. I wanted to mention Ollie Gordon, only 11% rostered. He gets a slight bump above the handcuff guys I'm going to mention just because he had 10 carries. And yes, it was a weird, odd blowout win for the Dolphins that you're probably not going to see a whole lot. He also had a 20-yard touchdown catch. But Achane had 7 targets in the passing game, and he had 18 carries. So Achane's still the clear RB1. But that regime, for however long they stick around, maybe bought a little more time with the win. But they definitely want to not overwork Achane too much. And Gordon gets into that territory is obviously a starter. If anything happens to Achane, knock on wood, because he's helping me in a lot of leagues this year. But a starter there and maybe a little standalone value. Then after that, we get back into the usual suspects of handcuff type guys. Blake Corum was getting touches, before his bye. Jaden Blues seen his role grow a little bit there. He had a season high 33% rush share on Sunday against Denver. He also fumbled. He didn't lose the fumble, so we'll see if that affects anything. But Jaden Blue is RB2 in Dallas, so he's I would say a high rated handcuff on a pretty decent offense this year. And then you end up going to guys like Devin Neal, Keaton Mitchell had a good game, Ray Davis, those types of handcuffs. You have to be super deep, and even all those guys in Fishbowl are owned. So, but that's kind of the handcuff update I have here.
I heard a few when I did the SiriusXM shows Friday and Saturday. People were like, do I play Devin Neal this week? And I was like, man, I get being desperate again. I'm playing Jeremy McNichols in a league. Like, I understand this, but we don't have to go down that level. Saints offense being as bad as they are, and no Kendra Miller now done for the rest of the season, which we had talked about when that was happening on the show last week. I'm a little bit hesitant on that. I think the running backs are deep enough where you can really have some conversations in normal 12-team leagues.
Didn't even get a carry this week.
Right,
so
exactly.
I mean, granted, the Saints only ran the ball 15 times. 3 of them were Shuck. 3 of them were Rattler. 2 of them were Taysom Hill.
Mm-hmm.
1 was a negative play to Olave, and Kamara got sick. So, like, Neal is very much, Kamara injury dependent. And I don't know. I still think Rattler gives this offense a better shot. I don't think Rattler threw the ball 21 times. Shuck threw the ball 30 times. Like,
Shuck did not throw it 30 times. Seriously?
I'm looking at the ESPN box score. It says 17 for 30 right now.
He came in midway through the third quarter, and by that point, the game was completely out of it. He has, I think his very first attempt was an interception. Was not his fault, but it still was an interception. Pass rush was insane. I'm watching that game because I had needed the Saints to beat the Buccaneers from a survivor perspective.
I had a lot of Shaheed and Olave, and so that game was interesting to me. But hey, I'm saying what I'm looking at.
30 attempts is crazy. I did not realize it was that many. I like Shuck relative to this draft class. Like, I thought he was fine as a second-round pick. We took him a bunch of dynasty leagues. I thought he'd be playing sooner than this. Spencer Rattler, for giving him credit, but the Saints need to know what they have out of their second-round pick if they want to have Shuck be their quarterback next year, or with their top 3 selection, do they take somebody else? So it always made sense to me that he was going to see some playing time. Rattler had 3 turnovers in the first half after a bad game prior against the Bears too. They were looking for a reason. I think Shuck is going to be probably the rest of the season's quarterback. It doesn't really matter for the Devin Neal conversation, but I do think Shuck is going to be that guy moving forward. Let's also re-rack the receivers, because this is going to be a little bit tougher with a bunch of different options. I have my priority ads, but I do think the number of names that you have mentioned, Jake, is going to be really important. Before we do that, though, word from our sponsors, Mega Sports. Elevate your game with the Ultimate Sports Contest, Mega Sports Progressive. Dive into a world of excitement with 3 progressive jackpots and a chance to win big every week and every month, rewarding 1,500 lucky winners, distributing over 50,000 in monthly prizes. All you do is answer 15 daily sports props, add up your correct responses for the week's cash prize, and then tally the week's total for huge monthly cash rewards. Mega Sports Pro makes it fun and easy to join, and it's a thrilling opportunity to be part of a growing community of sports enthusiasts. Sign up today and unlock a chance to win big every day, every week, and every month. Sign up for free, no commitments, no credit cards. Your first 9 days of play are free. Visit megasportspro.com today. We'll also take a word from our sponsors, Blue Wire. All right, we're back. And again, talking about the receiver position, I liked a bunch of these guys. Chimere DK, for example, for the Titans. I had talked about Alec Iomanor a couple times to begin the season. You had no Calvin Ridley this week, no Calvin Ridley last week. Chimere DK ends up leading the Titans receiving yards both days. And I don't know, maybe you don't want any shares of the Titans. I completely understand that. But I do think in the year 2025, there is always going to be at least one receiver on a team that has fantasy relevance, maybe outside of the Jets. And that's dependent on Garrett Wilson, right, being healthy or not healthy. But I think Chimere DK, I don't know, I had played him in Stake League. I ended up working out okay for me. I kind of think the Titans might have found something here out of their 4th-round pick. Yeah,
absolutely. He had a season-high 91% route share and season-high 21.6% target share in Week 8. He tied with Alec Iomanor for the team high with 8 targets. Played 59 snaps compared to 63 for Iomanor. It depends on Ridley's health, in my eyes. When Ridley's back out there, he just is going to warrant some snaps regardless. I don't think they can trade Ridley.
I was going to ask, because I did write that in the article. I think they could move Ridley. I don't know who wants him, though. He's injury prone and has a better contract.
Enough. I mean, could you see the Bills making a move? Can they eat that contract?
They did that with Amari Cooper last year. I mean, if there is a cheap asset for the Giants to acquire that could do what they want, Calvin Ridley fits like that mold to help develop Jackson Dartmoor. Right?
I mean, they might have the Giants might be the only ones with the cap room, I guess.
Here's a 6th-round pick, right, for Calvin Ridley. Do the Titans take that? I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, the Titans full on tank mode, but yeah, I mean, if something were to happen with Ridley, then yeah, Chimere Dike is fine, but I still think the utility is a little bit short term there. But dynasty leagues, great midseason ad, probably wasn't even drafted in dynasty leagues there. So yeah, that's a fine move here. What else do we got here?
I had wrote down Christian Watson, and I put in the article saying, I don't know if it was just me being pessimistic as a Packer fan or trying not to get too excited. I was shocked with how much Watson was utilized in that win over the Steelers. Like, he had a bunch of big plays that the very first past target went to Christian Watson, a nice little 5-yard out route to get him confidence. But the way Jordan Love was looking at Christian Watson, I don't know. The Packers never have volume dedicated to one receiver, but Love clearly had confidence right off the rip for Christian Watson. I thought that was fascinating to see.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he was, what did I have here? A 65% route share. He only ran 4 fewer routes than Matthew Golden, who Golden was a little bit banged up here. So we'll see if that changes here. But yeah, caught all 4 of his targets for 85 yards. The 33-yard gain I thought was a little bit fluky. That was kind of a Love throwing the ball up and Watson coming down with it. But, remember early in the career of Jordan Love, he's a lot more composed now and deliberate in his steps. But when he was in fourth quarter comeback mode and it was 4th and long early in his career, he would throw the ball up to Watson on the sidelines and see what happens, because Watson as a prospect coming up, there were maybe questions about his hands, but he was a super, super plus athlete, the RAS score and all of that. So he's a guy that might, that Love could be throwing some 50-50 balls to, maybe even a little more so than Romeo Doubs. Tucker Kraft clearly came into that territory, but Kraft is getting the ball on screens and letting people, get bowled over. Watson is the guy who 3rd and long, and it's going to be a punt anyway. Might as well chuck it up as high as you can throw it and see if he comes down with it. So yeah, Watson's interesting, but he's one of those best ball guys. It's going to be pretty boom or bust. He could go out and have a 3 touchdown game, but he could also go out and have 3 catches for 25 yards. So a boom or bust there.
Not in your list, but on the Waiver Wire article up on the RotoWire site, were both the Texans receivers, Jaden Higgins, the 2nd-round pick out of Iowa State, and then Jalen Knoll, the 3rd-round pick out of Iowa State as well, too. I love those selections at the time. I do the day 2, and I guess it's round 2 and round 3 article when it comes to the draft, and I'm going over one of those. I thought this makes complete sense to add depth to it. Nico Collins has always been injury-prone. Christian Kirk certainly has been. The idea that Jaden Higgins can just go ahead and replace Nico and Knoll replacing Kirk was awesome. Like, I loved the concept from the Texans. And then we had Xavier Hutchinson playing over Higgins for the first 6 weeks, and Knoll doesn't push out Christian Kirk as quickly as I hoped for. And the offensive line was miserable for the Texans. I really believe in the prospects, Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll. Like, I really, really think, especially Knoll, I really believe he could be a player that matters for this Texans team moving forward. But there's a lot of circumstances in the way, none of which just acknowledging this offensive line is not good for the Texans. They played great against the Niners because the Niners have 0 pass rush anymore with all the injuries, but most teams are going to provide more teeth to that offensive line. And you still had Xavier Hutchinson playing more, I guess getting more snaps there or close to it with Jaden Higgins. So I'm not advocating that you have to go out and get either Texan receiver. This is a Joe Bartel thing, but I really do like them as prospects, and I'm hoping at least Jaden Higgins can push Hutchinson out of the way to get more playing time opposite of Nico Collins when he's healthy.
The conclusion I drew here is, okay, you have a week where Nico Collins is out with a concussion. He'll probably be back next week. They get Denver next week, who's number 1, but I imagine Patrick Surtain is mostly on Nico Collins here. Looking at all of them, for the Texans, Noel, 5 of 6 targets for 63 on 28 snaps. Hutchinson, 5 of 6 targets for 69 and a score on 53 snaps. Higgins had 4 of 8 targets for 34 yards and a score on 61 snaps. Braxton Berrios also caught 5 passes, but usually inconsequential. For me, Noel, Hutchinson, those are desperation by-Mageddon plays with Collins out and all these other teams on bye. The only one that interests me a little bit is Higgins, is the only one that I think I would go ahead and roster out of that group. I mean, Noel passes the eye test for sure, but I don't think there's enough volume for him to sustain production without another extra injury there. And of course, when Christian Kirk comes back, that muddies the waters a little bit. But Noel and Hutchinson for now are probably on my drop list. Higgins is the one. If you've got extra bench space, grab him, but he's going to be a little tough to rely on here. But yeah, Higgins is the one for me that ascends above this whole group.
The only other receiver I mentioned was Malik Washington. If you do like Tua as a streaming quarterback, like Jake mentioned earlier, Malik Washington has been getting at least 5 targets really since the Tyreek Hill injury. He's been basically the team's bubble specialist. That's not a valuable role to me at all, especially with as bad of the offense as the Dolphins have been running. But he did score a touchdown. If we think there's going to be points here this Thursday against the Ravens, maybe Malik Washington is of consideration. I always target deep leagues when I'm writing the article, Jake. You have a lot of other receivers in this mix that maybe
I've got a bunch of other receivers. We're running pretty long on time. Should I just run them in quick hitter form?
I mean, we have very little tight ends that we're going to discuss, so I'm fine if you want to expand on the receivers.
Okay, well, I'll run my guys down, and then you can decide if you want to talk about any of them in further depth. We got a lot of usual suspects. I wanted to mention Tez Johnson. He actually jumped up above 52% for the Bucs. He's the clear wide receiver to Emeka Egbuka, who's still a little banged up. Now, granted, the Bucs are on a bye, but if coming out of that bye, Chris Godwin and his lower leg injury still is not healthy, we're not expecting Evans back to the fantasy playoffs. Tez Johnson's wide receiver 2 for the Bucs, and he will dip below 50% on the bye here. Kayshon Boutte, we maybe talked about a little bit here, but had another big game. He's a little hit or miss. Passing game limited with the Patriots comfortably ahead. But it was Mac Hollins and Boutte who led the Pats with 48 snaps, and Diggs only had 33. Boutte scored again, and he's averaging 18.8 PPR points per game over his last 3. Bootie's interesting. So we mentioned the Kayshon Boutte line. I sometimes call it the Troy Franklin guy of rosterable receivers, the Troy Franklin line. But of course, Franklin, 37% rostered. He went out and torches the Cowboys because that's what everybody does. Caught 7 of 8 for 89 yards and 2 scores. The production's certainly volatile, but he's definitely ahead of Mims on the depth chart. I mean, so is Pat Bryant. He's ahead of Mims. He had 33 snaps and a target rate, but I'm not picking Pat Bryant up anywhere. I mean, it's Sutton and it's Troy Franklin there in Denver. I think we have to mention Trey Tucker again. He's interesting because after the Raiders bye, he's down to 38% rostered. He obviously had the blow-up game early in the season, gets just enough volume to stay consistent. Jacoby Myers might get traded. That's another guy that's big time on the trade block. So, yeah, he's not the same receiver as Trey Tucker, but there will be more targets to go around. I think they'll rely heavily on Tucker in the back half of the season. Rashad Bateman's interesting. Not a great line after the bye, 2 of 4 targets for 51 yards. I'm actually not.
I love Bateman when Lamar Jackson's healthy. I love
exactly.
Bateman.
It was a put him on the list because Lamar's coming back. He had low ownership. Lamar will be back. Going to the Falcons, Drake London being a surprise inactive was weird. Darnell Mooney was a bust. But Kadero Hodge comes out and gets 8 targets. That's a 27% target share. Apparently, Kadero Hodge is Drake
Falcons
London
are dumb
when they're done. I'm getting down to the real scrappy.
This is annoying.
Exactly. Tyler Johnson led the Jets wide receivers with 5 targets. Obviously Garrett Wilson comes back and that goes moot. But and really the extra targets are going to Mason Taylor and Isaiah Davis. It seems. I took a flyer on one of the Jets receivers, didn't start him, but just picked him up in case something came up. Nothing really came up there. Tyler Johnson led it, but he's not startable, maybe not even rosterable. Darius Slayton led the Giants in targets with 5, on a 2 for 26. Not
had
really
a big touchdown call
either.
Back in a stupid OPI as well. It shouldn't have been called. Like that would have been like a
okay. That's worth noting. He could have made a big play there.
Yep.
And then now A.J. Brown has a hamstring injury. That's a complex situation all around. Granted, the Eagles are on a bye, but coming out of the bye, if Brown isn't quite healthy, I think Jahan Dotson's the man. He had a 40-yard touchdown, only 2 targets. He's in play as a late week ad next week if Brown gets negative injury news. But he did run a route on every single Philly dropback, which wasn't very many given the game flow there. But obviously Devontae Smith gets most of the work with Brown out. But Jahan Dotson would be in play if Brown misses more time here. And then I just wrote down, cut Jerry Jeudy. I'm frustrated with him. I'm done with him. Cut Luther Burden. I know some Bears guys were on the injury report. They were off. Olamide Zaccheaus is way higher on the depth chart than Luther Burden. That experiment for this year at least is done. I'd cut Keon Coleman. I'm not in a hurry to pick him back, up, especially if they get someone. I said cut Xavier Legette, Jaden Coker. I don't think the Carolina offense, whether it's Dalton, whether it's Bryce Young, can support a wide receiver too after Ted McMillan. So those guys can go. And Kendrick Bourne creeping up on the drop list too. He fell well behind Juwan Jennings in targets and usage this week. Possible Brock Purdy coming back. Bourne was always better with Mac Jones. Ricky Pearsall will be back soon, and eventually Brandon Ayuk as well. So, Kendrick Bourne goes on the drop list too. So just a handful of drops to make room for some of these upside guys.
Yeah, I think it's a good call. I specifically like the Trey Tucker one. If the Raiders do move Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker becomes that bit more value. Jack Besh had made my article the week prior because he had been getting more playing time over Deontay Thornton as well for the Raiders. So if you have any degree of faith, the Raiders' rest of season schedule isn't horrendous. You just have to hope that Geno Smith actually is the quarterback that he was supposed to be when the Raiders acquired him. He has not been that for basically the entire season, but I do think the Trey Tucker call in particular, widely available after the Raiders are on bye, and I love the Rashad Bateman as well, too. They will both be on my article as the week progresses. I teased it, Jake. The tight end position is unfortunately really bleak. Right now, at least on the published version of the article, there's only one entry to that list, and it's a guy on bye, Mason Taylor, who's already at 30% rostered. We've talked about him ad nauseum now. I don't feel like we have to, at least in this podcast, talk any more about Mason Taylor, but just realistically, this is a tough week if you're trying to find a waiver wire tight end.
Yeah, we're at the 50-minute mark, so I can do quick hitters once again. Obviously, you nailed it. You got a win last week for Rondé Gadsden. He's still at 61% roster, so do yourself a favor and scoop him up if you can.
That needs to be 100%.
We dropped Njoku for him. I dropped Mark Andrews for him. I dropped Juwan Jennings for him. Rondé Gadsden might be here to stay. Maybe some volatility to come, but the Chargers like everything about him, so go grab him. Again, heading into a bye, but Harold Fannon's only 46% rostered. Some might drop. Grab him and hold him if you can. Even with Njoku back, Fannin had the most catches, 6, the most targets, 8, the most yards, 62, and a score. That was all with Njoku back, who also had 4 for 37 and a score of his own. But Harold Fannin might be wide receiver 1 for this Cleveland offense here with tight end eligibility. I noted Mason Taylor again. He's only 29%. He finally showed up and needed an absolute shootout against the Bengals here. Led the team in targets. I don't think the offense is consistent enough to really trust him, but he's rosterable, and he definitely was a starter for me in Biomageddon that turned out all right. Then we're getting really digging down deep here. Theo Johnson has had back-to-back games with a 97% route participation here. We talk about the Giants needing somebody to contribute. He only caught 3 of 4 for 20 yards. Didn't really get schemed in the red zone, but we've seen Theo Johnson get schemed in the past. So he's viable in 2 tight end premium leagues or desperation starts. But again, I mentioned him 4th on the list for a reason. When Lamar Jackson comes back, Isaiah Likely, who's only 6% rostered, might get a little more interesting. He ran more routes, 16, than Mark Andrews, 15. Both played exactly 34 snaps here. As long as the Ravens season's together, I doubt they trade Mark Andrews, but that's been in discussion. I'm sure they've taken some calls on it. And of course, the Isaiah Likely ceiling goes up with Lamar Jackson returning here. So we have that. And then I just mentioned the note on the Bears. A lot of people thought with Cole Kmet out, he missed his first ever game with a back injury. Colston Loveland would be viable. He only caught 3 of 5 targets for 38 yards. I don't think Colston Loveland needs to be rostered, especially when Kmet is back. Look at these other guys first. Go back to Juwan Johnson, Fannin if you can. Gadsden is still an empty, a ton of fab on him if you haven't already.
Yeah, I was the one that thought Colston Love would have a breakout game. I said that on multiple different radio shows. Could have been more foolish about that. I love Mason Taylor, and I was like, no, I'll play Colston Loveland over Mason Taylor. In reality, it's just the game script of what happens when you have a Bengals defense and the Jets defense, and Jets defense has been horrible. So you just need the other half of that equation. Jets on bye, it doesn't make quite as much sense, but it's frustrating. The defenses from a streaming perspective, actually, I do think are at least useful. There's a few of them that we can go ahead and look at as well too for this week.
Yeah, a couple notes I wanted to share here. Well, first off, the Chargers, they're 66% rostered, so probably not out there. But if you can grab them, they play the Titans this week, who's number 1 in fantasy points allowed to opposing defense here. More realistically, though, is I'm going to go out and grab the Rams. They're only 38% rostered. A lot of people probably dropped them during their bye. I actually took a 0 in defense to not drop the Rams because they come back. They get the Saints at home coming out of their bye. And they're even at, after this week, they're like number 7 in total fantasy points scored by defenses. So definitely looking at the Rams at 38% here. I could drop the Rams to pick up the Commanders defense tonight in hopes the Commanders score 7.1 points. I'm not sure if I'm going to do that because I think the Commanders have just as likely a shot to get negative points. And I also don't want to drop the Rams. So in a league where I'm 5-2, I might just take the L there. That's an interesting dilemma there. I don't know if you have any.
I would do the same thing. I don't think they score 8 points. That would be really, really shocking to me.
Yeah, it'd be a shocker. But anyway, and then that's really it. Chances are you're going with the guys that you had been starting. San Francisco defense is interesting. I know they're super banged up and they're on the road, but like basically what I see is after the Rams, all of these defenses with somewhat matchups that you might consider are on the road and have other circumstances. So the 49ers are at the Giants, who, might be a little bit, demoralized by the Cam Scatterboo thing. They don't have any pass catchers, but San Francisco's banged up too, and they're heading across country to play on the road. I mean, I don't really want to play Dallas against Arizona coming out of a bye with Kyler Murray back.
You're right.
I don't really want to play the Jaguars. They're great at takeaways, but they're heading across the country to Vegas, of all places, their team's coming off a bye there too, both the Jags and the Raiders. So, the usual suspects that you look at, aren't really there. So you're sticking with what you have, or you're even, I would rarely do I do this, but I would say bid $1 or $2 on the Rams if you can, because they're going to be sustainable for the entire rest of the season. You might be able to not worry about streaming defenses anymore if you go ahead and throw the Rams on your roster.
Well, there you go. I think that was a very comprehensive breakdown of the Week 9 options from a waiver wire perspective at running back, receiver. Jake and I kind of disagree on the value of it. Overall, it is a deeper class of waiver wire options than we've had in past weeks, and the tight ends and streamers as well, too, having good conversation there at the end. We're back in next week, probably talking a little bit projection-wise with the NFL trade deadline looming 24 hours after next week's show. But thanks, everyone, for listening. Go ahead and follow along in the article itself, too. The video portion we posted in the article, too. And appreciate all your comments and support as well, too. Again, we'll be back in next week.